Hey, fellow Giganteers, those of us like our spirituality with a twist. So, as you will see, we have the pleasure of having a wonderful guest, massage therapist, body worker, fitness coach, actress, model, and just overall, all around wonderful being, Renaissance lady, overall goddess, Faydra Shantel. Thanks for coming on, Faydra.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is our second time conversing, so I'm looking forward to it. We had really, like, we were talking about it off mic. We had really nice, deep conversation last time that we walked away feeling rewarded by your presence.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I
And
was
you're
felt
sharing.
some.
And you're sharing. So this is actually a conversation we want to have around the suggestion from Phaedra, which is just a great topic and certainly within our wheelhouse, just considering identity from all kinds of directions, but like kind of talking about identity from like how we might feel about it personally, and then there's the whole issue of identity. So it was your idea, Phaedra, and we agreed I'd throw it to you first. So
Okay.
yeah, let's be cool to hear what you have
Well,
to say about it.
thanks. As I had said before we got on, this was a little bit of a topic that someone brought up earlier in the month, and I was really thinking about it because in all my different worlds, there's always something, So whether it's job, race, uh, gender, uh, lifestyle, and there's just so many different, like areas where we like to we label ourselves, whether it's because of safety, because it's, we have to, like we started it when we were kids, right? When they're like circle the box, black, white, not whatever, other. I was an other for most of my life. So it just started making me think about how we identify and how committed and connected we are to these identifiers and how it can be safe, dangerous, how it makes us feel comfortable. So I kind of went through a moment of where I'm like, huh, if I was to take all the things I identify, or like that could be an identifier for me, and to me, they're very fluid and they can change all the time, which I think with many people it can't because they have to be this way because it makes them feel safe. So I went through, if I can share, well, if someone was like, Phaedra, like, how do you identify? And I would say that I'm Phaedra, biracial Black American queer cis female solo poly demisexual submissive goddess. That's a lot. And in all the different, and that's just like me as a person. And then you added like what you said before, being a massage therapist and body worker and those other things too. And it's like, but that's not it. Those are just right there. And then you can start thinking of all these other things. And I think with all of us, we, not all of us, but some of us, we keep ourselves in these boxes of these one things, and it can create harm of who we are. Because if we lose that one thing or we change our mind one day, so I think that's what I wanted this whole like conversation to be about was in these different realms. Um, Maybe just finding, I don't know, just planting seeds and uh, allowing people to kind of, get a different perspective on identifying.
Yeah, it's
Phaedra,
such a.
why
Oh,
don't you
sorry.
give
Go
us
ahead.
the Phaedra, why don't you give us the genesis? That's because I think that'll be helpful for people to understand where your inspiration came from.
Can you say more on what you mean by Genesis?
Like where what you the conversation that you had with one of your people
Oh,
about this
yes.
specifically. I think that would be a nice background.
So, yes. Okay. So there was a friend of mine who has been in a certain uh, occupation for a very long time. And they truly like this is what their passion was, what they were meant to do, and like loved it. I'd see their posts about it and amazing, amazing. And I started seeing now me without any context, I didn't know. So I just started seeing a lot of posts that were coping mechanism posts, just like some things that were just positive, telling themselves things, or there was all these posts, and then I saw them at um where I work this one day, and they talked about how they lost their job. They got let go from this job that they've just been so connected to and so for so long. And they're just like, is there, and we were talking about this particular the podcast because of the last one that Daniel, when you and I were talking.
Yeah.
And they're just like, well, hey, is there any on just like identifying and how you get through that
Mhm.
um uh and just the change and what we can do. And I was kind of like, well, maybe I have to go back, but I'm like, here's the podcast. And then that's when I like texted Daniel and I said, has this ever been? I said, I believe you guys have talked about identity in certain different
Totally.
ways, especially like, I mean, religion. And I mean, that's part of what this whole podcast is about. However, this particular way of dealing with things and being able to cope and have a different mindset. And so I kind of was just thinking, I'm like, okay, if it hasn't been done, how can we talk about this in a way that's broad enough and specific enough and to get into all the different aspects of it?
Yeah, I know that the fragileness that you're talking about. So I like to do this kind of thing too, where I ask other people, "Hey, we're going to do this conversation on this pod. What do you think about that?" And it was interesting with one person I know because it's really obvious that they identify with the role of like mother, but now the kids are kind of
Mm.
getting older, and it's
Ah.
causing some problems. And you can see it's like a little
Mhm.
bit painful. I think what she said was, it's so obvious that these kids have been the most important things in my life, but I can't say it's reciprocal back from them. And I was like, ah, that's the thing, right? Being a mom or a parent or something.
Yeah.
And it was funny because when I said, well, what do you think about this identity thing? And she didn't say mom first. She said some other things, and that was interesting. And then when we
Oh,
doubled back, it was kind of like, isn't it kind of mom? And she went, yeah, it probably is. But it was eye-opening because it wasn't her gut reaction, which I find interesting. And maybe we'll talk more about that later. But it was also something where it was like it got her wheels kind of turning to other parts of her identity that she could see herself in a bigger picture. So in that sense, I think it was
yeah.
helpful too. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I guess you can put that in the context of being a wife or a husband or a partner.
Yeah.
And then for so many years, and then, because divorce separation happens, and then you're not.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, I don't have anyone to take care of anymore.
Yeah. It's so
Like, what?
jarring, right? So like
Hmm.
deeply jarring. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
she was kind of also saying, well, she sort of had the sense, like, when you're doing that role, you're on a timer, it's ticking
Mm,
away. And, we've all
yeah.
been, we've been all, I've been a kid, to
Mhm.
parents, and you're like, okay, now I'm flitting away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you don't think about it from that side, and obviously from the parental side, it's so deep. So yeah, it was one of those great conversation starters, like what you're talking about. So, hopefully an episode like this gets things rolling for people. I found that
Yeah.
with people too. Yeah.
But
Yeah. So what hit me for
awesome.
me, and I know what you two think about this, but what I found kind of interesting was there was on the one hand kind of like the gut reaction. If someone asks you, like, what do you say? And it was like there was one part of it that was very like immediate to me. And I'll share my things too. And maybe,
Yeah.
Daniel wants to do it. I'll go with what I thought it was. But I had some gut reactions. And I thought that was really interesting. It's sort of like I have like a psych degree in my background. So I was like, what's a psychological test? What do you say first? It's like almost
Yes.
like a word association. What's the first thing that pops up? And so things
Right.
popped up. And I'd read your list too. So maybe I was a little primed from the list. So it's
Yeah.
like things
Yeah.
pop. And then I went, well, wait a minute. The other part that I found about it really interesting was, okay, let me take a second back now and like self-reflect a little bit on it. And that's almost like a different thing where you
Mhm.
take a step back and you go, okay, those are my gut reactions. I still think they're true. But if I take a step back, okay, what do I think when I try to clarify this more? Was it like that at all for you, just out of curiosity? Were there certain things that were gut reactions and other things that you kind of went, oh, wait a minute, as I think about it more? Or did it all flow out in like one continuous thing for you?
I think well, I mean, even what I said tonight was different because what I originally was going to tell Daniel is like, in this moment, this is what this thing is because tomorrow it might be something different. And it was. So like, because people still, the question of like, what are you? And I am just like, I look at them knowing exactly what they mean. Like, what is like your, and now I can't even think of the word, your, uh, like your
Identity.
background,
Yeah,
like
like
what are your
demographic
parents,
information or
your
something.
demographic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, what are your parents? And my parents are both human. And like, okay, but where's their like ancestors from? And I'm like, oh, that's a great question. So and because like it's so funny because in the like world of acting and modeling, I'm culturally ambiguous.
Mm,
So it's like, what color's my hair this week? Do I have braids? Do I have this? Am I blonde? Am I purple? Whatever. So I can like, they kind of just like, well, we can just put you in there and you're going to represent everybody, which is kind of cool. And I kind of
yeah.
love that.
There's a power to that
Um,
kind of. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, like always considered myself biracial, and there's many, I think, mixed biracial individuals that will say like, I'm black and they identify as black. And so for me, like that, for whatever reason, and maybe it's just because I'm asked that a lot, I'm always like biracial. And then the Black American part was something new because it's something that I've been um very, I'm like, does it even matter? Like my mom gets very upset about when we say we're black. She's like, no, but you're not, you're mixed.
Mm.
And it's like, yeah, except that there's a one drop rule according to your ancestors and my ancestors. Like that's been a rule that's been made.
Yeah.
So we can go into like all that, and I'm not. And according to my ancestry.com, I'm actually more European and German and Norwegian than I am black. So, and then I started looking that up. I'm like, well, does that like mean anything? And then they started talking about culture and who you grew up with. When I grew up mostly with my mom's side of the family, I'm like, so I'm biracial white, really? And
Mm.
so like there's that whole in my head.
Yeah.
And then like where my sister and brother, like everyone thought my sister was Mexican. Everybody thought my brother was Puerto Rican. So it was like all these things that we're just like dealing with as far as labeling. And no, and then I think from there it just started to flow because I feel like I went through that being like that's those things biracial, I will never change. Like that's for sure what it's going to be. Black American, I am a biracial Black American woman. Those things will always be what they are. Um, cis female, cis, I've always like that's not going to change. Queer and cis female, those are things that are always going to be who I am, who I've always been. How now that I'm honest with myself, like like some of these things are just going to be. Now you move more into like the solo poly, the demisexual, the submissive, the goddess. Like, well, I'm always going to be a goddess, clearly. But the other stuff, those can change. They're like very changeling, like one day I'm like, you know what, I don't want to be this anymore. And so I think that's how I was able to kind of move into my list.
They're kind of fun to take them apart individually, but there is something like you're saying, and I know you think about this, Daniel, too, but if you've gone through changes, and like we've talked about in the previous episode, you've gone through changes, like real changes, then there can be a little
So
bit
many
more,
more since that episode.
yeah, but there could be more like flexibility, right? Like
Yeah,
we were talking about earlier, I think
it's
if you've never
fluid.
really gone through those transformations or something, right?
Hmm.
Then
Yeah.
you can get more stuck. But if you go along a little bit more, like I've changed before, I can change again. It feels a
I'm
little
like
bit
the
different.
epitome of a phoenix, like I just am like, bam, 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 burn. And then I rise and I'm like, who the hell am I today? I don't know. But it's always something more glorious than I thought I could even be. And it's just been doing that for the last 44 years of my life. And I'm happy about it.
Okay, just out of curiosity, one of the things you said, and I don't know what audience listeners will think about this, but when you use the word queer, that means like, what do you think that word fully entails? Because it's such a
Oh,
broad one and it can mean different things for different people. I think it's kind of interesting
yeah,
question.
it does. And And I've used it with someone that was older and they looked at me and they were very upset. And I knew it. I like it, and they didn't say anything, but the like look of fear in their face, I was like, oh, okay. Because I think, not I think, I clearly know queer, the word queer used many, many years ago was like, it was a derogatory. It was like calling
Yeah.
me a mulatto, you know? It's like the, the word mulatto is very like, come on, a mule and a, you know, it's makes people like whatever. However, I still have heard like not so much now, but I still hear a lot of Italian people call mixed people mulatto and they think it's okay. Or like or using Oriental, like not cool. But there's a lot of people that don't understand that that's not cool. So queer has been a word that has been taken back by a community, by, you know, my community and many of our communities that like it's just um it's not a box. I said I was pansexual for a long time, and which I still feel that I am. I just feel that the word queer is all encompassing and it's weird. And I'm so fucking weird. And the word queer sounds weird and it sounds inquisitive and it sounds curious and it sounds like we're all still figuring it out and we haven't yet. So please don't tell me what I am
Mm-hmm.
because I'm just me right now. And yeah,
It
so
gets
that's
into a
kind
lot of
of,
those nice like QU words too, like you were bringing up, like inquisitive, questioning,
yeah,
questing.
yeah. Yes, yes,
Yeah, it
yes.
has that feeling to it. Yeah, I like it too.
Hmm.
And it's big, right? It's a big
It
word.
is.
Yeah. Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
So
maybe
I've just started kind of like in the past year, um, identifying more queer with queer, as a word and or as a label. And I love it. It feels good. Like thematically, the word to me resonates.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so Daniel, I know you want to do lists. You got things on your mind you want to share? You want to go
Go
first,
ahead.
second? I get to go. Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. All I can say is there's like gut reaction things. And for me, and maybe it's because like I had my like little psyche gears turning. I was like, oh, this is interesting because I had the gut reaction. So the first thing that came up for me was obviously related to our little pod here in the sense like the spiritual things pop for me first. And that was like my very, very like first reaction. So I was sort of like, okay, like what's the thing that flitted through my mind first? And it was sort of this Buddhist tantric thing. I was like, okay, that seems to be like core for me. And that's the thing that like without even having to like take a nanosecond pop, that's what happened for me. And I was like, okay. And then with that, I realized that there's a sort of a range of things in that general wheelhouse that have been very deep for me. And I thought, well, these are all kind of part of unity in my mind. So it was sort of like, okay, I do this Buddhist Tantra. That's the heart, I guess, right? And it was very spontaneous. And then I had gotten initially into doing things in Zen, but I thought, well, that still fits together for me. That's really similar, right? I don't, though I can talk about it later on. I think when I stopped doing Zen, that was painful, because I felt like that identity thing, I had really kind of tied into that. And at some point I thought, well, I guess I'll do it now. Well, I guess I thought I'll be doing this for the rest of my life with this teacher in this way. And eventually I wouldn't even say, it's hard to say who changed. Probably I changed, and I thought, well, this isn't right for me anymore. And I had to leave. Right. And I went through maybe something similar to what you're describing with friend, acquaintance, coworker, or whoever the person you were talking about at the beginning, where I was like, man, this hurts. I remember for the first time not going to my usual Zen retreat, and I was like, oh, it feels bad. And I think I got through it I was like writing some music and I was doing some things that were kind of expressive, you know,
Yeah.
but it felt a little bit like a betrayal on some level that I had started to commit to this thing and now I'm not. So that felt bad. And I had relationships with people at the place where I was training. Some were good. Some of them had soured a little bit. But with the teacher I was studying with, it was very positive. But anyway, so I went through that kind of thing, that low crisis.
Hmm.
But those are the ones that kind of hit first. And then I have sort of this love of Buddhist Tantra and Tantra overall and Zen and Taoist things and Sufi things, all these things that kind of have been like deep passions of mine. You know, I asked
Mm.
my daughter about it. She's 23, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that's all right." You know, she's like, "Yeah, that's probably right." And we were talking
Mm,
through it, and she said, "You know, our, she's at that age too, where well, she was like when she was younger too. Kids are like this, anyways. But she has a sense of who she thinks I am, right?"
right.
And she was like, we joke with one another because she's a very fiery kind of wild person, and I'm like, Alina Baker, you are ridiculous, which is the old line they used to use
Lena Baker.
for like Bears player Devin Hester. Alina Baker, you are ridiculous. It's a joke. And then she's like, you're ridiculous too. And I'm like, it's true. And then she said it's because, you have all these passions that you kind of follow so intensely. And she's like, that's part of your nature. So, anyways, that was sort of like home base for me. I guess I'll throw it to you, Daniel, but that was the stuff that came first. Those kind of spiritual things were just like that popped out like immediate. How about for you,
Mm,
Daniel?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I this it's very difficult because I feel like you are who you tell yourself you are, right? And so
mm,
the more that you do something, the more that you continue to say it, the more that that becomes who you are. And simultaneously, who you surround yourself with also is who you are. So
mm,
you can, I mean, I mean, we all have different people. But there's a white person who grows up with lots of black people. They're white technically, but they're not really, you know? And that's
mm,
just one example, right? Any kind of race you can do that. So, if you're people who are like you feel like you're kin with them, then you're a part of those people. And that can change with time. So I always feel like, Phaedra talked about this being, this shifting as time goes on, how we identify ourselves,
mm,
so that it's hard to kind of like it's hard to stick on something. The way that I maybe you can describe it is that like in certain areas of life, if you're fixed on something, you become heavy and you sink. And if you try to always move around, you'll get exhausted and eventually you'll, float away or you'll die. You'll sink again. So you got to stay in between this area of being fixed and staying in the area of kind of being in flow so that you're neither one nor the other. But the problem with that is that you don't have something to change. And I think change is inherently part of existence. And so by having a label, then you can break out of it and have a new one and then change that and constantly be doing this thing. So I think it's a worthwhile exercise. I have many clients, some of whom, do well for themselves, some of whom are older gentlemen, who are near retirement age, and some maybe not, but just, have the ability to think about retirement, which is a luxury. And I have these conversations, as Phaedra, maybe you do as well with some of your PT clients. They get to the age, usually in their early 60s, mid 60s, they start thinking about the sort of next phase of their life where they're not going to be working as much, and they have a very difficult time if they have never really cultivated a hobby or cultivated something outside of work. Their work is their identity. And even if you enjoy it, even if you enjoy it, it's something where if you don't have something else that is growing at the same time that this thing is already so strong, that once this strong thing falls away, you don't really have an identity anymore. And therefore, you resist retiring, you resist letting go, you resist moving on because that is who you are. And now the question is, okay, well, then who am I if I am not that? So, in the benefit of identifying who it is that you are, you can have this as something to leave from, but then it's also in comparison to say, okay, I am those things, yes, but who am I if I am not those things? So I'm sort of like giving you my own internal argument with this
mm.
as a whole. I think with that said, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm a healer, or at least I try to be. Um, depending on who you ask, they might give descriptions of me differently, right? As everybody would for us, right? For better or worse, you know?
I have to say, Daniel, I kind of had a sense that that would be the lead, though. I don't know, something
Oh,
like that.
for
I was like, what will
sure.
Daniel say? And I was like, that has to be a lead, you know? Like,
Everything he just said, for sure. I was
yeah.
like, check, got it.
Yeah, you got it all. You got it all down.
I
We
Yeah.
was
were
literally
finding
like
it
walking
all.
around this afternoon going, what's Daniel going to say? And I could remember the moment I was, it's going to be healer. It's going to have to be that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So it
Yeah.
resonates with other people too. Yeah.
Healer, seeker, unifier, harmonizer as best as I can. Um, I'm a cis straight male by
Mhm.
just being born, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, I definitely identify as somebody who cares a lot. I know there's not a label for that, but I'm a passionate person. And so
Mm.
that means I like to play a little bit with fire. As you know, Phaedra has a red top on with a red background for those who are just doing the audio right now, very Valentine's themed. But passionate people get themselves into trouble because they like to be animated and follow, passions, and that often can lead to really great moments and disastrous moments and broken hearts and for ourselves and other people. And
Hey, Jen, I
so,
don't want to kill your flow, but just as a thing, like they do say the tantras are for passionate people. That was
oh
a
yeah, I was
selling
gonna, yeah,
point for
yeah,
me.
yeah,
I didn't want
yeah,
to jump on it, but
yeah.
yeah, it's like that. So, anyways, I'm sorry about that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, no, it's all good. Yeah. So, tantric practitioner, Taoist and Zen enthusiast, much like Eric is, and really in constant pursuit of unlocking whatever is here that I have yet to do. Because I think it's an aspect of life that is really important for me is to understand that the deeper layers of things. Like I was meditating this morning and I knew we were going to be having this conversation. And so there's these layers of observation, or I guess we call them like layers to practice. I don't know what the term for it is in Eric, but like when you do practice, right? There's external, internal, and secret. I don't know what those layers are called. What the overarching layers of those.
Yeah. They're kind of layers of reality almost, right? So the
Sure, you could do
practice kind of
layers of
mirrors that. So
reality.
they're kind of like mirroring layers of reality,
Yeah,
more
and so
obvious things, the things that are a little bit more inside, and then, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And so much like anything. So you see a picture of something and that's a symbol, but it means something more deep. And then when you get the deeper thing that has some maybe even effect on your life, and this is a sort of secret imprint that it has on you. And so I was thinking about these kinds of things and that these identifiers are for our outward perception, right? These are
Mm.
the external, but they come from an internal place. So as Phaedra talks about what she identifies with, she's giving words to a feeling.
Yeah.
And those feelings, that's the internal place. And the secret place probably would be the place that they come from before they're even a feeling that we carry around. These are karmic tendencies, genetic tendencies, astrological tendencies, right? That they sort of move into reality in this way. And so I'm gonna do something that I don't always do, but I'm gonna do a 90-degree turn if you don't mind here real quick. And so, as I'm doing my meditation this morning and thinking about this today, I had this in my mind as to like, okay, well, who am I? Who are we? And so there's this sort of elaborate meditation that I do on a regular basis that we'll do on our retreat coming up April 15th to April 19th. I will have on the link that I will attach to this video, which will be fantastic in person or online, as anybody could do. And the beginning stages of what this is a tantric practice called the generation stage practice. It's a meditation on moving through stages of life and or stages of death, coming back and forth either way. And as part of this, you will sort of emerge at some point as we could say the enlightened version of yourself, or the super Phaedra or the super Eric, or whatever, this like really shiny being that's of royal descent, and you're at the peak of your evolution, I guess I
One
could
could
say.
even use the word goddess.
There you go. Yes, thank you, Eric, that's a good way. Right. And so you take this. So I was sitting at this moment and saying, okay, and I don't want to give too much away, Eric, so you could totally, tell me not to say any more at any point, because some of this is they like to keep secret. But
Yeah, there's that part. Yeah, that's
but
true.
you can come out as a goddess, and you can come out as your own self as a goddess, or you can come out as a different goddess. Something that they have pictures of in many different traditions. You can come out as Jesus. You can come out as Kuan Yin. You can come out as
Maybe you
Ganesh.
could say archetype. That might resonate with some people,
Sure,
right?
an
Come out as an
archetype. Yeah,
archetype of enlightenment, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Mhm.
that's not our
That
archetype of
resonates with you, right?
yeah, of compassion, of wisdom, of love, of something, all these kinds of things, right? Aspects of
Yeah.
enlightenment. And so instead of taking the thing that I normally do, or one of several things, I said, what if I was to make one up right now? Who would I be? And so this is a very long-winded answer, and I will now give you, and whoever is listening to this,
Oh, this feels like
who
this needs a drum roll or something.
yes, yes. And so before I do this though, I had been planning this all day long. And so I'm gonna ask that if you guys want to do this, you're welcome to. Audience, if you want to do this, you're welcome to. People on Instagram or Facebook or wherever you're gonna watch this. Take some time and think about this. And with today, the technology that we have today, you can make this image using an AI image generator, right? And better than it ever has been before. So if you had this in your mind and you were never an artist, you would never be able to make this. You'd have to keep this in your mind as to, something that you imagine. But now if something you can imagine, you can actually create and kind of bring it into reality, right? Take the internal to the external, as we use the reference from earlier. So that's my ask if you guys want to do something like that. And I'll tell you mine, and then you could follow along with, however this works for you. So I said, okay, who if I was to be a picture of a deity, of a god, if you will, or a goddess if you're a female, how would I look? How would I be? How would I be? How would I appear? Okay. And so okay, so here's how I dreamed about it be. So I'm gonna have all of my accompaniments. All right. So in one hand, I
Accoutrements?
say again,
Your accoutrements?
my accoutrement. That's right. So on one hand,
Accoutrements and regalia. Yeah.
yes, yes. So in one hand, a trident.
Oh.
Okay, with probably some skulls on it because you have to have skulls if you're gonna do this,
Yeah.
right? On the other hand would be a pouch full of like a powder or a nectar. So those are I'm only two-handed. And some of these images you can have as many hands as you want. But I can only vision myself with two hands. So I only have one face, two legs, and two hands. That's all that I got. Some people have more. I'm limited in my ability to imagine myself more different, right? Um, Wrapped around my body would be a snake. I'd be close to naked, but I would have probably some basic kind of thing. Um, and then around my neck, I would wear. So when this is just an interesting thing, and sorry, I'm dominating this piece, but this is a very kind of
That
interesting thing.
is great. This is great.
So I had the image of the a Chinese coin. Okay, it's a circle, but in the middle, it's cut out with a square, and this is done for many reasons, but we like the sort of tantric way, and it's representing like heaven and earth. Heaven being round, earth being square. Okay, so that's how they represent this sort of like unity, if you want,
It's
or
like a
yin
yin
and
yang
yang.
thing. Yin and
Yeah, it's
yang
like
thing.
yin and
Yeah.
yang in their
Mhm.
currency. All right. So I don't know, that just came to my mind, and then what I had a very quick vision of was the Kaaba, which is the
Oh.
the place of like the Muslim pilgrimage, right? They're supposed to go
Oh, yeah,
every
yeah, yeah,
year to
yeah.
Mecca,
Yeah.
right? And they walk around counterclockwise around the Kaaba. But if you look at that from a far enough view, it's a square with a circle around the outside.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Nice.
Mm.
I would wear that around my neck,
Mhm.
but it would be live. And so this would be my external this is like this is the external vision of myself that has come from an internal place, and all these things have meaning, right? All these things and I'd also be covered in tattoos, and they would all have
Duh.
meaning, right? You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
Because then you see a picture of me and you go, oh, I know what he represents, right? I know what this is representing. But the part that I found that was most interesting is after I did this experiment, I said, but what's going on the inside? And then I said the same thing that's going on inside of every single being, person, deity, or otherwise. It's the same. And that I found to be probably the most sort of mind-blowing piece about all these things, other than the really cool image I have of myself.
Well, I guess that inner part like might be like a Buddha nature idea, right? We all have like our inner spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our transcendent aspects of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
This is like one of the most awesome like kind of these conversations. Because Daniel and I talk like
Great.
this all the time off mic.
Yeah.
And I'm always thinking,
I
okay, and we this is like Daniel and I playing with one
I
another,
love
like in our
it. I
way.
love it. I
So
love
Daniel will
it.
say like I'm holding a trident. I'm like, oh yeah, that happens with some of the divinities to hold the trident. It means that you can
Mhm.
have access to the wisdom of all the three transcendent worlds or something. There's a
Yeah,
symbolic meaning. And then like then he'd be like, well, there's a nectar bowl, and he'd be like, yeah, that means you have bliss and wisdom contained in the nectar. And we just talk this shit back
that's
and
so
forth. Daniel,
great.
of course,
That's
he
so
has his
great.
own meaning, but I'm always like thinking, oh, that
Yeah.
does have
Yeah.
its own thing. Even like what gets wrapped around the waist a lot of times is like a tiger skin,
Mm-hmm.
and it
That's
means that
exactly. I
you
was thinking tiger or bear skin for some
ah yeah,
reason.
yeah, yeah. And like when they do the symbology of this, it has this idea like you've learned how to control your aggression, right? You can use it
Hmm.
for good purpose, right? You have access
Yeah.
to it, but you're not
Yeah.
you can handle it for the best means or something. And it's wrapped around your waist, so probably there's sexuality aspect too. You've
Hmm.
understood that part of yourself, right? All that cool stuff. So I always Daniel and I have these conversations like, oh, interesting.
Interesting. And I
It's
love how
great.
AI just puts it like wraps it up in a bow, gives it to you in 10 seconds or maybe 30 to 60 seconds, depending how busy they are at the moment. But I think that like having all that and then just like I don't know. It's kind of funny, but like that was really cool hearing about all those elements, and I could see every single, like everything that you said. I was like, yep, yep, yep. It's a very interesting visual.
I guess as a theme
So
of the episode, like a snake sheds its skin, it's a symbol of transformation, which we've been
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
talking about the
th-
whole time, right? You have to
yeah,
shed
and
your
that's like
identity and take on a new one.
100%. Like that's been, and the whole 2025 was like that. And seriously, I feel like I've definitely just have done a lot of the the finality and the finality shedding of different parts in my life. So a lot of things that I would identify, like those things have changed too, because now we're getting into like a whole different energy of another year and another like animal and all the different things. So that shedding of skin is just beautiful and amazing, especially so when Daniel, when you said you had a snake around you, I was like, oh my God, yeah, because that's like I'm a snake. Like I get it. And it's this big warm hug, but also like at some points it's like, ah, gotta get off me for a second. That's beautiful.
Thanks. So let me ask you guys because we started this conversation with talking about identity and now we've sort of done that for each of us. And people can listen to this and decide for themselves who they are. The other half of the question that you sort of brought up before, Phaedra, was who are you when that identity is taken from you or you lose it or whatever. So if you guys don't mind with the last, the last third or quarter that we have here,
Mhm.
to go into that, because I think that that is valuable,
Yeah.
especially, we could be meta for a moment, right? And talk about the implementation of AI and the shifting dynamics in the workforce for people all over, the reduction of funding for, public and state services. Yeah, I mean, we're all going to roll our eyes at all this shit,
Mhm.
but if it ever gets fixed, I don't know. Things generally move towards poop as time goes on.
Mhm.
Um, you know, people have to deal with this from a financial level, but then you also have to deal with this on a very personal level. I mean, this has been in Eric's household on and off for the last, 8 or 9 months or so. So I wanted to have this
Mhm.
conversation for people who are inevitably going to deal with this, which we will at some point too, for other reasons. But I
Yeah.
thought it's worth talking about with you guys. I'm interested in what you think.
Do you
Um,
want that one first, Phaedra, or?
Sure. 'Cause it's not a very like meta answer. I think I'm here for the simple answers, which I'm totally fine with. I think about growing up and mm, knowing very clearly from a young age that I wanted to help. I wanted to heal. I thought at first I was going to go into like more of a um, like sports psychology and psychology and so like that kind of stuff. And um, then I got into personal training and stuff as I got later in high school and realized that it's very similar because you're helping people with their bodies going through a lot of stuff, their self-esteem, all this stuff. So when I got into massage therapy and body work and that kind of stuff, um, I think this whole like transition, and I think about this more, it's like, well, if and when I can't do this because of physical or like if anything happens and I don't, I've decided I'm working at Apt because I absolutely love that store and I can still help people and like do things, but it'll be a total transition. And I've realized that like as long as I have many gifts and I am so grateful to continue to use them. And I don't know how I'll feel. I don't know the amount of depression or how upset I'll be or how easy it'll be for me to transition. But I know I'm so capable. And that's something that I learned as a young kid is I'm so capable in so many different ways because I have not put myself in one thing. So for me, I know I'll be fine. Apparently I'm becoming a really good DIYer and I can like fix toilets and patch walls. So I may just like start my own channel on Instagram and like do stuff, like I'm quite capable. And so for me, I know that I'll be okay. However, with that, there's probably going to be a lot of feelings if there's something that's going to take me away from doing what I absolutely love to do at the core. And, yeah, I think that I can't speak for people these days that are losing things that they've gone and spent thousands and thousands of dollars in college and universities, and this is what they're doing. And now it's not available to do. I have no idea how that feels. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. I do know people who are kind of going through that in different ways, who built up entire careers for themselves and now like just because of the arbitrary actions of people who probably don't deserve the power that they have based on the intelligence that they have, can just wipe stuff out just cuz, right? So yeah, a lot of empathy for that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I might go like a different direction. I'm a like 90 degrees. We're going some ways in this stuff, but like I'm a like well, I guess I wanted to answer in the question at least in part, Daniel, and maybe before we get to like what's happening in the world at large, maybe just from a personal level, was as I was thinking about these questions, certain things popped out kind of fast, right? But what felt good to me about it was as I really thought about it, I realized there was a certain like continuity to the different things that appeared. So for me, like Phaedra had mentioned a lot of stuff about how she feels about relationships and love and sexuality, and these things were part of her list. And I looked at that. And for me, the thing that popped out second, I thought these spiritual things popped out first. And the second thing that popped out is my favorite phraseology of this coming from the great Esther Perel, which is I'm a little bit more of a uniqueness person than an exclusiveness
Hmm.
person. I tend to think of myself as like, I value the connections to individual people. They mean a lot to me. Regardless of the form of the relationship, I value karmic connection. I think that's why I
Yeah.
love like Sufism too. I love what Rumi did with that, that the power of the uniqueness of connecting to some person who's just special to you. And you
Yeah.
make that work no matter what that frame is. That's how I think, right? So I like to call that uniqueness. I think it's a great phrase. Some people more exclusivist, right? They're more like they want things to function in certain rules and forms and roles, husbands and wives and this and then, they
Yeah.
want it to be much more, the lines drawn much more a certain way than I do. But I like the idea, not even of the blurriness of the lines, which I guess I like too, but like the idea of like, no, I
Hmm.
think there are people who are just special to you, and however you make that work, you make that work. But the weird
Hmm.
thing for me when I pulled it together was that's actually part of how that's part of my spirituality too. It's part of how I see the world, right? You know, whether it's through a tantric filter or a Rumi Sufi filter or whatever, that's not unconnected. And I begin to think, okay, this is a great question in that different things might pop up for you or for any of us, different things you might even get with self-reflection, but you realize like, oh no, there's a continuity in like these things that have fit together for me, you know? Kind of what you said in the
Mhm.
very beginning, Daniel. You sort of build your identity at least partly for yourself, right? And I was realizing, yeah, something is constructed here, you know, that kind of fits together. As a point of like slight embarrassment, I didn't think parent for like 1 second initially.
Oh, you did talk about your daughter earlier, so it's
You
there.
No,
did, you
I love
did,
my
you
kids.
did.
I love them.
Yeah.
They're awesome. But the weird part I realized like it didn't come first. Ooh, and actually like even my work didn't occur to me for like a second. I had to
Yeah.
double back. But I thought, okay, that's interesting. But I thought, you know, the reason why I think of the kids the way they do is that they're just unique beings to me too.
Mm.
And the fact that they happen to be, you know, a son and a daughter, it's just that's who we are in this life, but maybe some other lifetime that, you know, I've been the son and or the daughter and they've been the parent. But you know, I felt that bond. I was like, oh, this fits. So I don't know what that means in terms of losing things. You know, we can have a lot of empathy for that, but I started to think, yeah, there's a certain continuity to maybe how you can make you see things fitting together for yourself, and then you know, you realize like the parts fit, and then you know, there's less, you feel less fragile maybe
Yeah.
in terms of losing things because there's more pieces that fit together into who you are, and any one little piece you realize is like it's just part of a bigger whole somehow that fits together in some way. At least that's how I thought about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's I have two people in my mind. One person is, and this is how it is. I'm sure it's this way for young women, but I think of young men right now in particular, because I think this is a particularly hard time for young men, just in general. Men in general, but young men in particular. It's just difficult, you know. Work is difficult, like all the things are difficult. And about all the young men who don't have an identity. So here we are talking about what we are. I don't know that they can have that. And so there's this a strong drive to try to find something to clarify what that is for them. So that's so one half is striving to find this identity. The other person who I have in my mind is somebody who is losing their work, losing their job as their identity on the other half, whether that be through retirement or through, like we talked about, just a couple minutes ago, through forces not of their own. Or you think of like, not so much anymore, but, for a long time, all those coal miners, right? Like they did for just generations. This is not like somebody like, granted, it's low life expectancy, but that's what they knew. That's what they did. That's who they are. And so there was some good discussions about this. A couple of years ago, people were looking at like why people were in certain voting blocks and whatnot. And they said that somebody described this as mobile. People who have mobile skills, skills that you can do in different areas, are more able to adapt when economic impacts local. They move, they change their things. But now I don't know. I think it's still even that still holds true, but this is a far more connected world than it even was 10 years ago. So you can still be found in somewhere else. And so I don't know, I want to do one more around here, and I'll certainly do my thing, but for like either one of those sides, and you guys are people, this doesn't have to be any kind of like researched kind of thing. We're just sort of, spitballing here because I feel like people who listen to this do listen. They take the whole
Mhm.
thing in, and I always talk about this, so I don't like beating a dead horse, but fuck that horse, I'm going to beat it again. Um, we spend there's a large battle for people's attention, and when people tune into this, I like to bring up things of value, that I think that I'm curious about, that I would like to investigate a little bit, and so we're talking about identity, but who are we when we lose it? And I know, Eric, you think that it's a mosaic of things that are the identity, but I don't know. The uniqueness person, I think, is more of a rarity. Maybe it's a third or something like this. Even you think how many people are involved in polyamorous situations, now we can debate that a little bit more based on how many people cheat and things like this, which is probably 70, 80% in life, like whatever. And that's just
70, 80 or different podcast episodes after that on that subject, right? 'Cause there's
yeah,
so
yeah,
many
no, just
aspects to all of this, right? Yeah, that's
yeah,
years of podcasts. Yeah.
yeah. So, but I mean, in terms of like a thing just based around identity here, just because I find it to be such like a fascinating topic about putting yourself in something so that you can leave it, but then if you don't have it, you want to gravitate towards it, but then you can feel like you're confined at the same time. But then when it's not there, where do we go? How do we handle that? How do we handle the drift, before we find the next thing? Because I don't know that it's a skill that we have um, well developed.
Well, I guess I'll try to. I don't know if you want to go first, Phaedra. You're still thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm still thinking.
Yeah, I'm gonna like give gut reactions to these
Yeah, yeah,
things, right? So for me, as we've been talking about this, this kind of conversation go in like multiple different directions, but we ended up in this place. If I look honestly at myself, if I lost the things that I do in terms of like say my professional life, it
yeah,
means a lot to me.
yeah.
And if I look at it, to know that I'm helping other people in the way that I'm able to do that while I still enjoy myself means a lot, you know? So if I were to lose that, that would feel really bad. I can't lie to myself about that.
Mm,
I'd be completely bullshitting myself if I didn't admit that, right? Like that's very true. On the other hand of this, I suppose, and this is like the Jin and Tantra piece for me, right? Would be like if you can find like those maybe like more core spiritual, philosophical, existential things, that can sometimes be like your boy that carries you through the rocky waves or something. That's bad poetry. But the waves are crashy and you're like, okay, I have this thing, that still can help me out even in like the most difficult of times, right? And I think maybe that's like another part of a solution or something. Of course, that's a pitch of this podcast. See if you can find your spiritual meaning, your spiritual path, what
mm,
speaks to you personally,
Yeah.
existentially, philosophically. And then sometimes that's the thing that will carry through.
mm,
We were doing this episode recently with one of our guests, and he's a big fan of like Viktor Frankl, like who's a psychologist who very famously like survived the concentration camps. And when he talks about how did he do it, and part of how he did it was he just kept this core meaning, even under such dire conditions. So it's hard to get your mind around that, like a lot of things we've been talking about. But like a little bit I can understand it, because I've been through, loss of loved ones, deaths, personal illnesses that were pretty intense, where there's a lot of physical pain and difficulty. But somehow I think, maybe one of the themes of our podcast overall is if you can find that core thing. I mean,
mm,
fuck it, we started this thing during a pandemic. That's when we started,
Yeah.
and people were really feeling rattled. And part of it was like, can you find that core sense of like, okay, this is mine, and no one can take that away from me, regardless of whatever happens in the circumstances. There might be something in that. It's
Yeah.
a hard thing to think about, but there is some truth in that. That's the thing that sometimes can hold you even when things go shitty, right? And
Hmm.
we've been doing this podcast, and things have been varying degrees of shitty the entire time since we started this thing. So it's not like, nothing's new as far as that goes, but maybe this is maybe a continual truth. I mean, it's a gut level reaction to what you're talking about for what it's worth. Yeah.
I'm so glad you went first. Because it kind of helped me like I was trying like I had some feelings about it, but I want to kind of piggyback off of what you said because when we think about like simply like values, right? And so when we talk about everything we value and what our value system is. And I just something that came that resonated and popped up was like finding, those things. And I'm like, okay, I I think personally for me, I live my life with freedom and pleasure. Those are like two very high on my value systems, freedom and pleasure. Now, if my freedom got taken away, whether it be because like, I get in an accident and so my freedom of like not being able to like walk or like something, anything where something physically on me takes away some kind of freedom, how would I find my pleasure? And like, or, like there's taking what we value and how we value what our values are in life and being able to transmute them into just what we are seeing today and in this moment, and then have to make them something different because we don't have the ability to make what we thought yesterday was our freedom and our pleasure and this and that. And so, or whatever your top values are, however you live your life, I think that mm, recognizing, kind of going back to what we were saying before, that there's there can be this fluidity about it. There can be change. There can be like, we live in an area where there's seasons, that it's not always going to be like sunny. So we learn our bodies, our blood thickens when it gets colder, our blood thins when it gets warmer. And so knowing that we can handle life in that way because our bodies will do it. So maybe in those instances where we are faced with change and having to have a label change or an identity change, um, we have to use different like parts of our brain to understand and to deal with it. And um, which can be hard for some people, but I think it's a good way to start. Like, okay, how do I go about this? Because it can be done. It's just we have to like allow ourselves to do that.
I guess from like a little like Jin and Tantra point of view, when you talk about freedom and pleasure, those are like kind of primary, I think, values within like a tantric spiritual framework too, right?
Mm,
And I mean, even the pitch for the retreat we're going to be doing, but I think about this a lot meditatively is like, can you learn how to like work with your own mind and your own internal world to produce that pleasure too, right? You
yeah.
enjoy the pleasure of being out in the world, and those are wonderful. And those are
Yeah.
transformative, those are great. Have them, share them with other people, and do it. And then there's those private moments where you try to explore your own inner nature to think, can I generate feelings of freedom and pleasure inside myself, and
Yeah.
learn how to do that. And I guess that's a lot of what the tantric meditation is trying to be about,
Yeah.
So in
That's
any
cool.
moment, maybe you can learn how to just do that a little bit for yourself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
those values are obviously wonderful, right? Freedom and pleasure. Those are
Mm,
fantastic values, right?
they really are.
At the core. Yeah.
Mm.
I had one other
Yeah.
thing, Daniel, but I'll throw it to you
Go ahead.
first, I
No,
guess,
go
right?
ahead. Do your thing. Go ahead, Eric.
The other thing that hit me, and it's coming up with freedom as we were talking, we're getting towards the end of this pod for today, but like as I was reflecting on what you initially had sent out, Phaedra, I got to this funny point where I did think about our podcast and what's going on in the world as you were bringing up, Daniel, over the past year, and even in the way our discussions kind of moved and evolved because we felt this need to address like, hey, there's a lot of funky stuff going on in the world, and we're going to have to, in our own way, respond and comment. And we've tried to do it in a way that I think fit our mission statement, but also was responsive to that. And I was thinking about all that, and I realized like there was a phrase that hit my mind because some of the other things I was listening to was like, I'm kind of anti-authoritarian on some level. I don't like it. Why? Well, because freedom and pleasure are primary values. And those people who feel like they're going to take away other people's freedom and their other movement towards their own self-determined pleasures, right? The ones that you get to decide for yourself. I don't like it. And I realized like how strong that was. And I thought about again the stuff that we've been doing, Daniel, and it just hit me like, oh yeah, that's part of this too for me. I don't know how that fits into like a total identity, but it does. And that informed a lot of what I wanted us to do. And I know we kind of made it kind of part of our joint little project, in our own ways. But I was like, yeah, that's probably part of an identity too. But when I pulled that all together, I realized like, again, it kind of fits as a package because the spiritualities I like have that quality. They have that queer quality, that unorthodox quality, the part where no, we're not going to be some,
Yeah.
like ascetic people foregoing pleasure. Fuck that. We're going to have
Yeah.
pleasure in our lives. We're going to have that. We're going to have freedom. We're going to have these things as part of our spiritual path. And like, then you think, okay, I want to teach, or maybe I want to do work with patients or clients or whatever you're doing. That's what I want to share with them. So that fits. You start to realize it kind of has a momentum to it. That's what I want to be as a parent to pass on to my kids, or I want to share with the people who I feel are uniquely important in my world. You start to realize there's something
Mhm.
going on in the whole thing. Anyways, it felt that way for me. So
Yeah.
anyways, my gut reaction around that. Yeah.
Well, I think in the similarities between you guys, I'll use the words organizing life principles. And for Phaedra, she used the term values, and for Eric, he used the term, I think, overarching theme, to aim towards something. And I guess the takeaway that I have from what you guys shared is that this idea of having themes that are going through your life that you're working towards. So, Eric is working towards the, development of himself and whatever you want to call it, enlightenment, calling whatever that development, however you
Best
want
you
to
can do.
use.
Yeah.
Yeah, as best as you could do, right? And Phaedra's identified things that she is working towards. And so what that means is that because those things, those are your North Star, that's your tent poles, that you're going to work around those things regardless of whatever else kind of circumstances are happening. And if people, which is Eric, and I'm glad that you brought that up because we've talked about this before. It's been a while though since we've discussed it, which I thought is a great answer because if we are looking at it from a perspective of what it is that we have lost, we don't remember what it is that we may have gained at the same time, or what else it is that we are working on that we can never lose. And that's, you know, when you're having an economic discussion about people who worked in a coal mine their whole life or whatever, it's like, okay, well, unfortunately, that sucks. It's probably financially hard, but that identity is no longer an option. That's not enough. Like, and more importantly, who are you while you were doing that? Who were you while you were doing that? At what position in society were you operating at when you were going into the earth and coming in? And that's a very, I'm using that example just to kind of be thematically cohesive, but it's like you're exhausted, you work, you go home, you relax, you do your thing. That's all that you do. And I think for a lot of people, that's still their life. They work more, maybe they're not as exhausted physically, but you're exhausted mentally because you got to pay for this shit. You got to sit in traffic. You got all your phone's up your ass. Like you got all this other kind of stuff. Emails a million times a day or whatever it is for people. But they don't have a lot of time to do anything else. And so, sort of my takeaway from what you guys are saying is to identify the other aspects of your life that have value, that transcend these particular temporary identities. Yes, this here is also a temporary identity, but my job or my career, no matter what it is an even more temporary identity. And if I can take the time to prioritize things that transcend the temporal and that are here for my life that I'm building on, then I'm not going to say regardless of what happens to you, because there are, if God forbid something happened, Phaedra couldn't do the work that she enjoys doing, this conversation would come back and it's more serious. Now you got to put it into practice, but you still have those organizing principles. It's like, okay, how can I still enjoy this thing and how can I still practice that thing? I'm going to make myself be in a situation where those two things can still occur, even if it doesn't look the way that it looked last week or the way that it looked last month, last year, next year, whatever the case is. But I'm organizing myself around that. And the same would go for Eric. So I think that is very useful. So thank you guys for
Can I say
sharing that.
one other thing, Daniel? I mean, because
Yeah.
and I'll get your all's feedback, and if we all got the time to do it, another 5 to 10 or something. But one thing's occurred, like if you talk about like getting hurt in life, so
Mm.
I mean, there's no doubt that like I've tried to love very intensely, and at times I've gotten hurt. And
Yeah.
like you can sit and you can say to yourself, what does that mean? But I've thought about this. Like I was on retreat over the weekend and it was hitting me, and I was like, well, I want to build the karma. I want to build the momentum. I'm a Buddhist person, so I'll use karma, right? I want to build that karma of being a person who is willing to love intensely. I
Mhm.
want to have that built into the nature of who I am, right? And even though I might get hurt, and at times I've gotten hurt, uh, uh, but I'm like, okay, I still, even if I get hurt, I still want to build that part of who I am. I want to build that karmic character within myself. And you can think of that in all kinds of directions. I want to build the karmic character of someone who's against authoritarianism. That's the karmic character I want to have. I will want to build the karmic character like I want to be a healing person in the world, kind of what you were talking about, Danielle. Earlier, in a lot of our work, we work with people trying to help them. I want to
Mm-hmm.
build that into myself, and that's kind of a very Buddhist tantric or Buddhist attitude about things, right? I'm building that part of myself. If you get really Buddhist, then you think, okay, well, these qualities in myself will even transcend this life because I'll continue on in some other life, but I'll have built that momentum of being that person, and you could take that with a lot of the things that we were putting as values. I want to carry the values of someone who values freedom, and I want to value the freedom of others. That's a value. I'm going to build that into who I am, to build that into my spirit, to build that into my being, if that makes sense. And I was just thinking about that a lot over the retreat. So, anyways, I thought I'd throw it out to y'all too.
That's if I may, real quick. It's
Yeah.
so funny you said that because I don't think I realized this was like a Buddhist concept, but I think I I've always been the person in my friendships who'll be like, no, I always love like I've never loved. Like if you've never loved you like or maybe there's a different way of saying it, like love like I've never been hurt because like every situation is different, all this stuff, and a lot of individuals as they love, because I'm the same. I love so hard, so intense. And then when that doesn't work, instead of taking that over to the next thing, it's like, nope, boom, it's like a little puppy. Like I don't remember the other thing, like whatever. Or you do when you learn things, but like that's such a cool, like that's an interesting concept because I guess I didn't realize that like that was a Buddhist concept, but I hear you and I feel that too. And so like that's a cool,
Yeah, I
a
like the
really nice
idea.
thing.
It spoke to me. Like, I want to love even in a way that, like, okay, whether things go bad or good, I still want to be able to love, you know,
Yeah.
even with that individual person. I still want to love that person. I don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
have that as my value, right?
Yes.
And that's something
Yes.
you can own for yourself, right? And no one can take that
Yeah.
away from you.
Nope.
What did
Yeah,
Samit say last week, Eric? We were talking about mantra, and what he said was the greatest mantra, I love you.
I think that's true.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's as good as Om Mani Padme Hung or something, right? Which
Yeah.
probably all the mantras mean that in some way or another in the end, anyways. What do the mantras mean? To have wisdom and to love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's wise to love.
We're well, it is February, Eric, so we're in it. You know what I mean?
I
We're in
know.
it. So it's good.
Someone, literally a student, asked me my favorite color yesterday, and I was like, "Why are you asking me this?" So I said in the class,
Oh.
"Are there any questions?" And someone said, "What's your favorite color?" And I was like, "What the hell? Why are you asking me this?" But I said red.
Okay. Well,
Color of the heart, the color of the goddesses, right?
I always answer clear.
Oh, well, that's a good answer too. That's all the
Of course
colors
you
together.
would. Yes.
That's
Of
all the
course you
colors like
would.
blended
Of
together.
course. Of
I
course.
taught my little brother when he was young some life skillful life lessons. One, what's your favorite food? Ice. What's your favorite drink? Water. And what's your favorite color? Clear.
Such simple men.
All the
Yeah,
same
that's
answer.
right. All
Yeah.
right. Well, Phaedra, thank you so much for coming on. This
Thank
is a
you
great
guys. I
conversation.
appreciate you.
Eric, thank you so much as always. Audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Hit us up at ginandtantra@gmail.com. Leave a like, comment, maybe even a subscription in the
Yeah.
video. It's free. If you have any questions for Phaedra, please feel free to leave a comment on the video or wherever else you might be seeing this, one of the shorts or on Instagram or whatever. Show us some love at the Gin and Tantra podcast on Insta. And I don't know, wherever else we are, we be where we be. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us today again. For Phaedra and Eric, this is Daniel. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Bye.